Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt TV. My name is Stefan Bienkowski and I'm joined today by Euan Robertson to discuss a really interesting topic that really gets to the heart of why we at Transfermarkt like to categorize stats. It's why we look into the data. It's why we like to track the market value of players and their progress over the course of the career. Because today, Euan has put together a piece looking at which teenagers across the top 5 leagues have picked up the most minutes so far this season, and then afterwards we'll take a look at which leagues among the top 5 leagues are actually offering the most game time to young players. Might be some surprises in there, so definitely pay attention and stick around to the end of that video to find out about that. But Euan, let's jump straight into this list of the top 10 teenagers excuse me, who have picked up the most minutes. There's some surprising names in there, but perhaps also some household names as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating to look at the list, and it's perhaps no surprise that the top two spaces are occupied by Barcelona players, given prominence that the Masia Academy has had in Hansi Flick's really incredible start to the season in La Liga with the Catalan side. I think many people would have had Real Madrid as title favourites, and they probably still do, but it's Barcelona who are leading the way and go into that last international break in top. By no surprise is Lamine Yamal, obviously the Barcelona wonder kid, the Spanish wonder kid, who's now the most valuable Spanish player of all time on Transfermarkt, and he's played 733 minutes across 9 games for Barcelona this season, putting up incredible attacking numbers and really confirming his space as probably the best young talent in the world. And second is Paul Cabrasi, another exceptional young talent who came through Barcelona last season. He's played 665 minutes for Barcelona, and at 17 he's already, an established first-team regular at centre-back, which is kind of a problem position with Ronaldo Araujo's injury this campaign as well. What you should say when looking into this list is La Liga has played 9 games, so that is different from the Premier League, for example, which is 7, League One, which is also 7, so that does skew the data a little bit, and maybe that's why the two Barcelona players are top.
Yeah, definitely context that's necessary for this list, but I think it still does a good job of saying which young players are getting game time. As you said, Lamine Yamal, one of the stars of the European Championships, and when you combine him with Cabarce and obviously so many other younger players at Barcelona, Gavi, Pedri, the list goes on. It's really interesting, really exciting time actually for Barcelona, who've gone through so much turmoil financially, and they've now got a head coach in Hansi Flick who seems more than happy to kind of throw game time at the younger players. So we'll definitely have to do a deeper dive into Barcelona in future videos. But if we bring it back to the Premier League, there's also a few players there that Premier League fans may notice as well, Euan. The most obvious one is Kobe Maianu, who comes in at 6th in that Man United team, as you mentioned. But there's also Jack Hinshelwood at Brighton.
Yeah, he's been a really key part of Huxley's plans this season. He's a really versatile player. He can play right back. He's played predominantly left back this season. He's also played central midfield for England youth teams already this campaign. He's really rising to prominence. He's probably the next player you expect to kind of come through Brighton and be sold on for big money. Obviously, he's an academy graduate as well, which is always the most pleasing thing for football fans around the world. You can see one of your own players develop into the first team. He's an exceptional talent. Obviously ranked 4th in the list with 608 minutes, and I expect him to be a first team regular throughout the season. And then next summer we'll probably hear about the likes of United and City and Liverpool and Arsenal maybe making the move, because those teams have been linked in the past. There's also Kobe Mino, who shot to prominence last season. Started the Euro 2004 semi-final against Netherlands for England and played so well. Obviously, Manchester United are having another disappointing campaign thus far under pressure, Ten Hag, but Mino has been good this season. He's probably not reached the heights of last season, but there's no question his talent level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Hinshelwood is definitely one that Premier League fans should keep an eye on, considering the history of left-backs at Brighton. Obviously, Cucurella, Ben Chilwell, 2 examples of that, who tend to move on for huge transfer fees. And if Hinshelwood continues to play well for Brighton and for the England under-21s, as you said, it won't be long before he's being linked with the top 4 clubs. Let's kind of take a step back, take a look at European football as a whole, and this is also some other data that you pulled together which I think is really interesting, and it takes a look at how many minutes in total teenagers have picked up in the top 5 leagues in Europe so far this season. And I would say, quite some surprising numbers here, Euan.
Yeah, really surprising. I completely agree with you as well in terms of how interested I was personally, and hope everyone who's watching the video finds it equally as interesting. But it's amazing that we can pull this data on Transfermarkt, and it shows that we looked at minutes given to teenagers across the top 5 leagues, so all clubs combined up until the international break there. And it's perhaps no surprise, Steph, I don't know if you agree with me here, that League One is so far ahead of the other top 5 leagues that it's given 8,483 minutes, which is almost double that of the Liga in second place with 4,459 minutes. I'm not sure. Do you expect that as well? I kind of did.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite interesting. I mean, I think when it comes to Liga, it's obviously a league that has been kind of bombarded with financial problems recently. They had a huge issue with the broadcasting deal over the last couple of years. Not a huge amount of money outside the kind of top 2 or 3 clubs. And French football's also always been quite happy to just kind of turn to youth players when they can't bring in their own or bring in new ones from abroad. So that makes perfect sense. I'd probably say that's probably why La Liga is also second on that table as well, because outside of the maybe top 4 or 5 teams, there isn't as much money as there perhaps was, and we've seen a kind of return to kind of youth football, which in the long term will actually probably do Spanish football really well. But the interesting one in third place is the Premier League, and I think rightly the league's always had a reputation for maybe buying first, thinking later, and that often has come in the way of developing their own players. But as we can see here, you're in third place ahead of Serie A and Bundesliga.
That was the biggest surprise to me on the list that Premier League did rank there. Obviously, when we get this data, kind of going in blind, and you have a kind of expectation in your head of what the results will show, and I expect the Premier League to be bottom, just because, like you mentioned, there the riches that are on offer to the clubs. They can go and buy players from all around the world and take them in, and not many clubs give you a chance. But increasingly, like you mentioned, you are seeing this real kind of movement towards playing young players. Chelsea have had so many headlines over the last 18 to 24 months about their signing policy, but they have the youngest starting 11 in the league this season. They've got so many quality young players. Some will even make them actually squad. They have that many at the club. You look at Manchester United and Liverpool. I know we did an article last week, Stefan, about how they give more first team opportunities to young players, academy graduates than any other club in England. So that's the two arguably the biggest clubs in England go down that way as well. So it's a really fascinating moment. I think this is something that we will update and look at across the course of the season. So it'll be interesting to see where we are come, say, January, the turn of the year, or where we are even at the end of the season, whether this kind of levels up and how these rankings change. But yeah, I'd fully expect League One to still be ranking first come the end of the season. But you'll probably be able to shine a light more on the Bundesliga and why that's perhaps moved down the list, because in previous seasons and across the decades, Bundesliga has been known for a real good league for developing younger talent.
Yeah, well, I actually think the Bundesliga and the Premier League are kind of the two sides of the same issue, really. I think, for example, in the Premier League, I think we've seen a real kind of professionalization of the kind of mid-table to bottom half table clubs, really kind of putting more effort into scouting young players, signing them and developing them, because not only makes far more sense and obviously signing older players on bigger wages, but I think a lot of clubs have looked at the money that Brighton have made, the Brentford have made, Southampton as well to an extent as well, in picking up young players from academies. Manchester City and Chelsea probably the most obvious ones, developing them for 2 or 3 years and then selling them sometimes straight back to those clubs, which is bizarre. But that means that we're seeing a lot of younger players bought straight from academies and going straight into Premier League teams. And we can see that, obviously, we mentioned just the fact that Brighton obviously have a player in the top 10 across all of Europe's 5 leagues is a perfect example of that. But what that also means is that clubs around Europe that used to be the kind of middlemen for these kind of career paths, perhaps a good example is maybe Borussia Dortmund, who used to be very good at picking up young players in England, developing them in Germany, and then selling them back to the Premier League. We're actually seeing a lot of these Premier League clubs step in and say, well, we can do that too, and we'll do it instead. Thank you very much. So I think we're probably seeing the Bundesliga take a step back from that kind of style of football, a step back from developing their own players, unfortunately, as well. And there's actually been a real kind of prevalence in bringing in players from abroad. And I can think of maybe 2 or 3 clubs in particular in Germany who have had a lot of success buying players from Liga, for example, developing them and then obviously selling them on. And that's fine, and that's their prerogative, but it does get in the way of developing their own players in Germany. And I think it is a big discussion in Germany right now. I think it was a big discussion after the last World Cup that the German FA made a decision to kind of really revitalise and completely change up how youth football is trained and coached in Germany as well, because they realised that the same kind of the previous number of German players just simply weren't getting through to first team football in Germany. And I think this table shows a perfect example of why that is a problem and why the Premier League is maybe kind of stepping ahead of them in that regard. Might not be English players who are the teenagers getting game time in the Premier League. Maybe it is. I think it probably is as well, to be honest. But in most cases, I think we're probably seeing Premier League clubs being far more proactive at that age group than we maybe did 5 or 10 years ago, Euan.
A really interesting point there you make, Stefan, about it being English players, because that is what you are now seeing in the Premier League, like you just raised. So 4 of the top 5 teenagers that have the most minutes in the Premier League are English. So you've got Jack Hinshelwood, Kobe Mino, Rico Lewis, and Tyler Dibling, who just came through at Southampton this season. So that is a real kind of shift, and it's really interesting when you crunch these numbers and you look at it. You are seeing these trends, and it'll be really interesting to see over the course of the season whether that remains. I think you know more about the Bundesliga than I do, but I think it was Paul Wanner from Heidenberg who had the most minutes for a teenager in the Bundesliga, and the only other player in the top 20 from the German top flight was Tom Roffa of Union Berlin.
Yeah, Vanner's actually on loan from Bayern Munich. He's a very big prospect, but yes, it's a good example, perfect example. Well, yeah, that's very interesting. Hopefully you guys found it very interesting. If you want to dig further into these stats, please do head over to the Transfermarkt website, and you should see Euan's article on the homepage from this afternoon, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Euan, going up. So yeah, by the time this video is up, you guys should be able to see it on the website. But let's know what you think. Do you think the Premier League is kind of getting its act together with developing young English talent? Do you think it makes sense that it should be more proactive in kind of taking these kind of spots away from Italian and German clubs? And of course, let us know what you think about that top 10 listing of those teenagers. Which ones do you think will develop into top stars? Do you think anyone can catch Lamine Yamal? And if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll speak to you guys soon.